My name is Gib Johnson. I'm going to put on my glasses first. I'm one of the many volunteers at the Carpinteria Arts Center. We're welcoming you today, and we're very happy to hear Fran Collin here. He was kind enough to jury our current show, Thru The Lens, which closes tomorrow. Fran has been a professional photographer for 3 decades. As a young man, Fran enlisted in the Air Force, where he served as a still photographer. After the Air Force, Fran entered the Brooks Institute on the GI Bill and graduated in 1982. He very quickly went to New York and became assistant to photographers there, and eventually made his career there as a commercial photographer. After 20 years in the cold, snowy Northeast, Fran wanted to come back to the Central Coast. Wise decision. He's now been in Carpinteria for 12 years, although he's practiced many different types of commercial photography. Above all, Fran considers himself a portrait photographer. His career has allowed him access to particularly accomplished people, as well as an opportunity to experience new places and different cultures. Fran feels it a privilege and a trust to enter different worlds with each assignment. In the summer of 2016, he traveled to Rwanda and Central East Africa with the Santa Barbara nonprofit, World Dance for Humanity, and took the photo of children you see inside at that time. The Carpinteria Arts Center welcomes the acclaimed photographer, Fran Collin, and thanks him for giving our jurors talk today. Thank you, Fran, very much.
Do I need to talk into the microphone?
Well, for them you do, but not for the recording.
Well, thank you for all. Can you? Is this working? I can't tell.
Yes, it is.
Does this sound better? Does this sound better?
Yeah, the microphone.
This sounds better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, I'm very happy to be here for the second annual photo show. I think it's a very successful one. I have to say, it was a little bit of a nervous task to accept this in a certain extent, because when I put on photo shows, they're my photos. So, like, I feel as good as I do about them, but at least I put out the best of what I got. Not knowing what was going to come my way, I really hoped that we had good pictures. And we certainly had good pictures. So, I know there's, I don't know how many people here have entered, but let's just, a little round of applause for all the people who have pictures in the show. I also have to say that last year, I can't remember exactly how many people sold photographs, but I think we surpassed that this year. I know it's not always a reason that you put photographs in a show, but you know, for the Carpinteria Arts Center, it's a big benefit if we do sell pictures. So I'd just like to say, I just want to mention some of the people. This is just not in any order whatsoever, but Glenn Dubach, I don't know if he's here. Glenn sold a photo, and I think Glenn was third place as well. So fantastic that Glenn did a photo, sold a photo, and David Paudral sold 2. Wow. Amy Rodriguez, any of these people here? I guess you just take the money and run, right? You don't need to be here. You showed and you sold, okay? And John Venable. Okay, so he sold 1 too. So anyway, we sold 6 pictures, and I think maybe last year we sold 1 or 2, and I think that's definitely fantastic, and I also think it reflects the quality of the work that was shown. I really was impressed and so happy to see the quality of the work that was here. You just never know. you know, because as we'll get into here and there in this talk, is that, so who doesn't possess a camera on them right now? Is there anyone that doesn't have a camera?
Does the phone count?
Y'all got a phone, right? So you got a camera. So anyway, so that's, okay, so I guess maybe I need to talk more about how I started out and how I got to this point and how it would matter what happens with cell phone cameras as compared to how I started out in photography. I went to Brooks Institute. I graduated in 1982. Well, all right, so, okay, so first of all, is it, if I move this way or that, do I have to really, I got to stay on this thing, don't I? Okay, all right. So I went into the Air Force as a still photographer in 1975. When I got out, on the GI Bill, I went to Brooks Institute. I graduated in 1982. Also, I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, which, as anybody who knows Brooks history, have had really difficult times with being legitimate, whatever. But I think when I was there, it was. But I also, so I got Bachelor of Arts. My wife got a PhD, which was putting hubby through, which sort of like extends like the whole, my whole career, okay? But that was the way it was. It was a family-run school, and I, at this point, I'd like to say it was a trade school. It taught me how to be a photographer in the sense of there was a lot of technology. Film is not easy, especially transparency film. Okay, so how many people here shoot film? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so about 3-4% shot film here.
Are you talking about actual film?
Like
Yeah, like slides
photo,
or
anything.
or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, are there people who want to pursue photography as a career here? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So, I know there's people that I know. Okay, so for instance, I may have to just single some people out just to make conversation. But Alex, have you ever shot film?
I have. Minimally, it was mainly because I had taken general photography classes in college, and that was one of the prerequisites was to do one assignment. But really, not much. It's pretty minimal.
Okay, so Alex did shot film as requirements for school, but really is not interested. And Alex is interesting in this also, as well as being a first place winner. You can applaud anytime. We can do lots of applause. We can do that.
Thank you.
His is probably the most opposite of shooting film. I was here yesterday, and a group of people came in, and it was really interesting. There was 4 people. One was shooting film. One couldn't tell if, like for instance, Alex's picture was actually a photograph. Like, could you consider it a photograph? But that's the range we have here. How many people here have pictures in the show? Just so I can signal out people who to refer to. Okay, so back to being in Brooks. So at this point, I considered it was a trade school. And I learned how to expose film. I learned how to use 4x5 and view cameras. I learned perspective. I learned how to focus, expose for shadows, have the correct color balance. You know, there was so many things. You know, consider, let's just say as a carpenter, having to do everything with hand tools, and then now all of a sudden you can just program something and it just carves it out for you. You don't have to do that anymore. So I think some of the hardest part, is there anybody here that has only done digital photography, that has never shot film? Okay. Because there's a lot of people I feel that never really shot film. And so from my background, having achieved what I feel is somewhat of a mastery of just being completely objective, of putting in the time, learning how to expose film, the color balance, you know, the range of what you would capture. That was really hard, you know. That was really hard to do. One thing that comes to me, and I put all kinds of random notes here. We'll just see how this works out. But Malcolm Gladwell did a book called The Outliers, and he said that it took 10,000 hours of concentrated effort into what you did to become a master. Now I feel like where we're at, okay, and that was like 9 years ago he wrote that, and 9 years ago I believed it. I felt like, yeah, you know, like what I feel comfortable with and what I've accomplished, yeah, I feel like I put those 10,000 hours in. But now, you know, you got a new program, you put 10 hours into it, you're pretty good, okay? It's amazing what you can do with 10 hours on a new program now. So I don't even know how you could even say 10,000 hours now even relates with the technology that we have. And also, you know, also the fact that not that many people took really important photographs. I mean, I brought some books in to show, you know, pictures that I feel like captured history and marked time. But now we mark time like almost every second of the day. We shoot all kinds of pictures. And I have to say, it took me a while to adapt to the easy digital capture that people made. Also, the fact that, okay, so there's lots of apps that you can use. You can do so much on your phone, or if you put on Instagram, there may be another 10 different things that you can do to your picture before or whatever. But I feel like a lot of that is for sport. It's just because you can. You made it a little bit different. Maybe it was just fine the way you shot it. But it couldn't possibly be different, more opposite than the learned trade that I did. And I don't want to, and I think that for a lot of people, and I don't feel like I came from the covered wagon sort of basis of photography, you know. But I think almost in terms of the how we've changed from where I started, where it was just such hands-on. It was really, it was more, like even after I went to school, I apprenticed. So it wasn't, you just didn't get out of school and take pictures. Now I'm not really even sure you need to go to school. I think I really don't. Anyway, I think that for a lot of people of my generation, I think there was actually a real hostility towards the ease of how people could make pictures, be so happy with them, and be satisfied, even though, and they thought they were good enough. That's one of the things that I think that's happened. There's a little dilution of craft. And of course now also we see everybody's snapshot. So, you know, in the past, you know, we all took pictures on Instamatic cameras and all kind of stuff. We had them processed, whoever could process film or show it at that time. And that was cool, you know, and you took a few pictures that came out good, and you put them in your photo album and whatever. But now we blast them all over the place. Well, I suppose that competes with every image that's made by anybody, and I have to embrace that because I love looking at pictures. So I don't have a problem how anybody makes them if they're engaging. Anyway, this is my first camera. I got this one about 8 years old. 50 cents and 2 Campbell soup labels. I got my Hawkeye Flash Fun Kodak camera. And believe it or not, I couldn't find any photos. I have some, but I actually shot portraits of people. I shot people in the neighborhood. I shot my parents. That's what I did with it. Now, just on the other hand, let me just show you one other thing. So this is my recent camera, which couldn't be any farther from that, okay? So, how many people have drones here? I know you do.
Same one.
We're going to fire this thing up later. We're going to do a group shot, okay? But you won't believe, okay? So this is where I came from, and this is where I am now, okay? But and I have to say that so many of my colleagues don't take pictures anymore for a living. They don't. And, you know, for us, if you just came up in the most highly technological and privileged, and you also had some money, you were in it, okay? You had the software, you had the equipment, you had everything. You blasted through. You did the most amazing things. You know, I have to say, of all the people in here, I don't want to keep bringing Alex up, but there's other people that I want to make comparisons to, but who, you know, is completely in the new generation of photography. And I was here yesterday, and there was a group of people that were in tourists traveling, looking through the show, and they asked if it was even a picture, if it was a photograph. And then there were other people that said that they liked other pictures that were strictly, obviously, a photograph, that were, there was no manipulation. Maybe there was some toning or something that went to it or whatever. But anyway, it's really fantastic to see the range of pictures that we have here and the quality of pictures that we have here. And I am very honored to have been chosen to talk about this, to have picked these pictures, and thank God that y'all did good pictures, you know, because that would have been the biggest nightmare ever. All right, so anyway, so back to this. So I wanted to be a photographer, I think basically my whole life. I really, really didn't have another mission. I think by about the time I was in 8th grade, I had a darkroom. I've had a darkroom my whole life. I just have the equipment now. Last year I bought a sink for just reasons of setting it up. I took a back seat on that, and I have some photographs, and at some point maybe I think we want to take some breaks and go in the gallery and look at everybody's pictures and talk about that. But I brought some photographs also that are silver prints printed from film from a series that I did, and at some point maybe we should look at those. And I also brought some pictures that were scanned and printed from those to compare the difference. All right, so let me ask, does anybody have any questions at this point?
I want to ask you what was going on the day you took that photograph in there.
Okay, so that was interesting. So we blasted in, okay? So we did a stay over in Amsterdam, and then flew to Kigali. I guess we stayed that night. Got on a van first thing in the morning, drove, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, and then all of a sudden find ourselves in this enormously remote area, walking like on the edge of hillsides and cliffs, experiencing just like all of a sudden you're just experiencing this world that these people live in full time. And for me, I guess just to backtrack just a little bit, the obvious pictures that would be taken would show people in the environment that they lived in, would show that background, and really that's what you always see. But for me, it was really about the faces of the people. All the other pictures have been taken before, but I brought, and I thought about bringing it today, but maybe that's a workshop on its own. But how I actually did that on the fly, because we didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of time because there were the greeting events and meeting the people at each community. But in the end, anybody who wanted their photograph taken, I took them aside. I set up a natural light studio and photographed the faces of those people. Because for me, you know, I don't want to go on safari. I don't want to shoot zebras. I don't want to shoot. I'm sure it's really interesting, and the only thing they really have there that's like a draw for that is gorillas. That sounds pretty intense. That might be pretty interesting to photograph, but that wasn't. It was really about the people, and so my setting up this backdrop and shooting at each place and choosing the people who wanted to be photographed, that was my goal. So on top of capturing all the dance and all the people in their environment, I wanted to photograph them. And, you know, I guess getting back a little bit to how easy it is to take pictures now, I also thought about how it was in the early days of photography, where there was actually a traveling photographer. And however he traveled, I don't know if he had a horse-driven van or whatever, but everybody knew the photographer was going to come into town, and they all got dressed up, and he did these photographs. And it was a special moment. It was a special time, and it marked that time. And that's what I wanted to do on this trip, as well as shooting the other pictures. What was so brilliant was that what I've seen in the pictures of people that were part of those stagecoach photographers who, you know, traveled from town to town and took people's pictures, that those people all exuded a certain emotion. They knew that they were going to be recorded and captured in that moment, and it was a great success for me that those people actually, that happened when I did these pictures. It might not have, but you know, as I've said before, especially with a lot of the kids, is that I would be taking pictures and they would come up and touch my skin. They would pinch me. They would, like, because they thought, well, what do you feel like? What are you like? Because I was like an alien to them, because they had never seen someone of my color there. But the interesting too, because it was also probably the first time any of these people had ever been kind of nailed down in front of a backdrop with a guy taking their picture. This is also a very unusual circumstance, which would have been the same in the 20s or 30s or whatever. It did happen last year for me. And so I'm very happy for that. And the picture that I put in with those kids, for as quick as we had, okay, so imagine today, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 kids, okay? 11 kids. Get 11 kids today to fall into place for a group shot, okay? Yet these kids did, but they also were engaged in the moment. I don't think there's one of those kids' faces that you look at that don't realize that a presence. And that's what I find in a lot of the photography from the 20s and 30s, 40s, is that there's a real presence in people's expressions. And so that's what I tried to do there. Any more questions? No? Okay, so I also brought my resume so I could remind myself. But so after I graduated Brooks Institute in 1982, and we stayed here for a couple of years, my wife and I, and just because we love the area so much, and we always felt like this is where we wanted to end up and live. And here we are, okay? So that worked out. But when I went to New York, no matter the experience I had, the education I had, you're in New York City. You're working for the highest profile photographers that there are, the highest accounts that you're not just going to walk in and take those accounts. So you have to apprentice. You become an assistant. I was very good black and white printer. I did a lot of printing for Anna Leibovitz, as well as working on the set with her. Also, Wayne Mazer. I don't know. A lot of these people may be like too far back now for anyone to remember, but he actually was the only person I worked full time with, and Guess Jeans, which is still a big ad campaign. He made a big, I guess, because of the eroticism that he did with Guess Jeans and shot in black and white, he became very famous during that period of time, and I worked with him then. Gene Paliuso, someone you might not know, who did beautiful photographs. Roy Volkman did much with dance. I worked in his darkroom. David Michael Kennedy did a lot of rock and roll stuff, a lot of black and white, worked in his darkroom. And many photographers that got me to the point where I started working for Interview magazine, and that was really one of my goals. Interview magazine was about the coolest magazine at the time that I could think of, and I think it was like every Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday, they would review portfolios, and I went every week. I went so often that they began to think that the pictures they saw I had already done for them. Well, you did this for us, right? This is one of ours. No, I haven't. No, that wasn't. That's how relentless you have to be a photographer. You have to be so relentless that you, I don't know, how relentless do you have to be? Pretty relentless. It's not easy, and I'm imagining it's harder now in a lot of ways. Does anybody here just shoot film? Or is everyone digital? I wish more people that had been in the show were here, but I'd like to know how they did what they did. Well, maybe we'll take a little break and let's look at some pictures. What do you think? Other people that dedicated their time and had that access.
45 years of it.
Yeah. A lot of it is opportunity. You know,
Yeah.
if you have the opportunity to get in there and you're taking pictures, then you're going to get it. You know?
Fortunate I've gotten into that, and I've got, access. I get media credentials because I shoot for, a couple magazines. So it's half the battle once you're there, getting in there.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
You still have a wet darkroom?
I don't. I still have the stuff. I bought a sink last year. I sold it just a few months ago. I'm really having a hard time with giving it up completely.
Why? I was going to ask you that. Why haven't you? Time-wise, is that you don't have the time to get back into that?
Well, it's a big production to set up a real darkroom again and plumb it and do all that. Also, it would be a completely personal thing. I don't know if anything could come of it commercially. Like a couple
Other
of
than your self-gratification
just my own,
to do it.
Just my own, and maybe do shows or something like that. But everything I get, like last week I shot something. They called me and could never do it. If I was shooting film and doing it, they'd say, well, we'd call Fran, but it takes like a week or two to get his pictures. We need them Friday.
Did you know a photographer by the name of Dennis Gray? Graduated from Brooks, lives in San Francisco. Did a lot of portrait photography.
Do you know what year? With Brooks it was weird because you had this continuous thing. There could be just one guy who's just a few months, one class ahead, and then you wouldn't.
You'd never see him.
You would never see him.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so Alex, just instantly is on the other end of the spectrum, as well as Lawrence. Is he here? No. unfortunately. Is that Lawrence?
Lawrence Scott.
Yeah. I wish Lawrence was here because I would have loved to have him talk. But okay, I've taken lots of pictures out of airplane windows. I actually love it. And when I saw that he was window seat 4D, I actually, for a long time, I did window seat, which seat number I was. So when I saw 4D, I thought, okay, well, he was in first class because like it goes up to at least 6. So you're gonna like 4D is definitely first class, but that's not what it is. What's 4D?
Well, 4D is actually a reference to the fourth dimension. So for me, it's kind of like a classification system where, you know, it's part of an ongoing series where the fourth dimension is really a reference to time. You know, a lot of people have sort of brought that up as fourth dimension is the dimension of time. And so in this series, you know, what I do is return to the same location at multiple times a day, or even multiple times, you know, throughout the year, and take an identical photo. And so, what's really the challenge is to replicate the shot that you had gotten before. And you know, like you were saying before, with you know nowadays it's so easy to take a snapshot. Everyone's got a camera on them. It's almost like, you know, pushing the digital possibilities as far as I could was really my response to that, and how I was able to like break out and do something a little different. And you know, that's for me where the creative touch came in. So you know, was manipulation and editing. So I thought, you know, how can we really push the boundaries in terms of editing? And so, you know, for this series, it's I get pretty carried away in Photoshop and basically overlapping layers together and blending them from different times. So this particular shot is actually a little harder to tell, and it's much different than any other shot in the series. Like if you look in the other room at the Manhattan skyline, that one's a lot more clear what's happening, because it's, you know, it's a pretty clear transition. It's like a gradient from the sunrise, midday right in the middle, to night on the right side. So that one's very clear. Whereas this one on the beach here, it's a little harder to tell what part of the image came from what time, and that was actually a different time of year completely. So, you know, I would take a whole time lapse, and so it's funny because it goes back to this whole idea of the decisive moment in photography, that, you know, that's one of the aspects of the creativity and the aspect of control, is when you decide to take the picture. But it's really interesting because with these, you're taking pictures over the span of a time, so then it's almost in post that you can make that decision of what goes in and what is left out. So for example, you know, there were people walking up and down these paths, and in this shot, for example, and so, you know, if I wanted to include a number of people, or include someone on the bluff, or, you know, have a bunch of people walking around, that's, you know, a creative decision that I could have made. But instead, I chose to just eliminate the people, so it was more just a natural landscape. And then again, you know, because it was just a rolling series of time lapse, I was able to choose like the perfect placement of the birds flying by, you know, that at one point we're crossing that point in the frame. So that's what I really love about it, is, you know, it adds this new dimension of control, and where you can have a lot more intention to the photo and a lot more creative freedom. But this one was different because it was the first time that an image in this series was not at a specific location. The only commonality was being on a plane. So, you know, with any other location, I would need to, you know, very like take detailed records of how exactly my camera was set up. So, you know, down to like what crack in the sidewalk my tripod is standing on, and, you know, how high the legs are, and what focal length, and camera angle, and all that kind of stuff. But with this, it was a little different because, you know, I just took one photo inside the plane, and then thought, like, let's go back through my archives, and I was actually able to find other photos, similar photos that I'd taken out of a plane, and said, you know, why not use this as a
as the, you know, the transition element. So, you know, I found a shot from sunset and golden hour just out of a plane. And again, completely different flight, completely different location. So that's what I thought was really interesting about that. This shot in particular is it was a much different approach. And a little bit more challenging in that way, but in some ways easier than the rest of the photos in that series. Because it was more, you know, the only thing that had to match up was the wing. Besides the wing, everything was, you know, just the landscape. As long as the horizon's at the same level, it works. But
Okay, well, that's successful. So, okay, so the opposite end of the spectrum. Well, we could go with this because we know Marco's here. Let's talk with Marco. So on the other end of the spectrum is a found place and photograph with no, I'm going to say maybe there's manipulation with shadows or something like that, maybe not. But this is something where the difference between Alex's mindset of I'm going to do this assemblage, you know, this is great for this. I know the sky will work for this. I know that I'm going to put this together. This is the other end of the spectrum. This is, I would say photojournalism, but it's street photography. It's finding found images at that right moment when the light is right, when the shadows are right, and you make a photograph that has impact. Just that one time.
The show must go on.
Yeah, yeah, it does. So anyway, so I think on the other end of the spectrum, and there's others photographs, I mean, obviously that do that, but I think yours is, I think, would you say is like mostly a straight capture?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, that's my approach to photography. I always have my camera with me, and I'm always present. I think one of the things in photography is to be present to what's going on around you, and I'm always aware. And I'm always looking for an image, like you said before, you know, you're always looking, and then all of a sudden, you know, all the planets
lines up,
and that's when, you know,
and you can't not do it.
You capture it, yeah. And it's like you said too, it's, you know, that moment, you know, that when everything comes together. So that's my approach in all the photographs, and then how I photograph. And I have my camera with me all the time, and I'm looking, and I was just happened to be walking by here, and you know, things came together. I just thought it was interesting, you know, the shadow play on this image. There's nothing more than that, but
it's that moment, you know, 5 minutes earlier, 5 minutes later,
exactly.
Right?
It would have been a completely different picture, or not a picture
at all. Exactly right.
And my eye tends to gravitate to things that are very graphic, you know, so I use, you know, and I see things like that all the time. Now, in regards to how I print, I don't manipulate at all. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I don't even crop my pictures, because I have this traditionalist thing that, you know, it has to be what I see and nothing else, you know. And basically I just process normally, and I try to keep, because I come from the film days too, and I try to keep my shadows, detail in my shadows all the time, because I think it's important.
And this is film?
This one is not film, that one is film.
Okay. Because I'm not even sure if it, you know, this is a sort of detail, you know, if you even go back to like an Ansel Adams time, that there's detail, how the shadow is. These are some of the great accomplishments of film that you could do. Of course, now digital has become so excellent in that, and the control that you have to alter that. But you know, to me, this is the other end of the spectrum, as well as there's a few other people. Is there any other people that were recognized here that for their photos that we could talk about? Okay, where are your pictures? And you too? Oh, okay, okay. So we got somebody right here. So let's do that. These are yours?
Yeah.
Leanne? Okay. So I'm guessing either is this film or digital?
It's digital.
Why don't you jump in here? Okay. So did you the dramatic effect? Did you do it through filters on your camera, or did you do it in?
No filters.
Because in film, we would use like red filters or polarizing filters,
Well, I did some
or
of that
something
in
like that.
Photoshop.
In
And
Photoshop, you
I
use it.
replaced the sky because it's obviously a color. Mm-hmm. And it was a bright blue, cloudless sky.
Okay.
So I did go into the different RGB layers, the red, green, and blue, and play with, put that sky in, and I went to my collection of clouds.
Okay.
And I didn't want puffy ones, I wanted something that...
So here we have so you're working the same fashion that Alex did, except providing more of a traditional view where you might have thought, well, you might have found it that way, you know. I actually wasn't sure if yours your plane image wasn't exactly that way. I wasn't really sure how much you did. This I thought might have been like a red filter or polarizer, and then boosted a little bit or whatever. But you did Photoshop manipulation as well, in the same way.
In Lightroom too.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, the major thing as far as it being altered was replacing the sky.
Well, okay, all right. Okay, so and who other people have work hanging that we could maybe talk in your?
They turn out to be things that were not something I could replicate, and not necessarily things like the series of. So later on in my photographic career, if you want to call it that, I started thinking that I could dream photographs or think up photographs, and that I could manipulate real things to make photographs.